Welcome to Delenda est Carthago, a curmudgeons.net podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andy.
And I'm your other host, Aaron. We're here to cut through the clutter of some of today's headlines.
This is the all-Catholic episode of the podcast. Right now, I'll turn it over to Aaron, our senior Vatican expert / correspondent / know-it-all.
That last part is true. Well, rumor has it, there's a new pope. I don't know how you'd know that. The media not covering it much at all.
I may have heard something about this.
Yes?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Slightly sure, yes.
All right. So this guy is 76 years old, which makes him roughly old.
Young pope.
Yes, that's young for a pope, old for a normal human being.
Okay.
Comes from a life of doing nothing, I believe.
Being old?
Well, that's how they spend most of their time.
Okay.
Yes.
They spend most of their time being old?
Indeed. However, there's some significant things about Pope.
Go ahead.
And I cringe. Francis.
Francis, yep. I'm going to call him Pope Frank.
I like that. I thought, if you're going to name yourself Francis, you should be a woman, right?
One would think, yes.
All right. And you go by Fran. You still don't even say Francis, because it still sounds horrible even for a woman.
Don't give them any ideas. Next Pope. They're already working on that with their priests and bishops, right?
What do you mean?
Women popes. Women...
oh, no, they're not.
No?
That's some schismatic section of the church.
I thought that they had to do that to be relevant.
Well, that's what's said. But this guy's uber conservative, supposedly.
Right. Okay.
Even though I heard he has said that, according, I believe it was The Guardian, said that he is okay with using contraceptives in Africa to prevent disease outbreak. Now,
no, so it depends on what purpose you're using them for.
Well, that was my question. How are you okay with that?
You get an exemption.
Well, okay. So the idea is you're not allowing procreation. I get that,
right?
But are you still not allowing procreation?
You get an exemption, all right? Just move on.
I wonder how much that costs.
Nothing to see here.
What? Indulgence of that variety? Is that like €5, €10? Oh wait, no, this was in Africa.
It's in Africa,
so whatever
the local
Remundis.
Yeah, Remundis. Is it coming to America?
Yeah. All right, so he's the first Latin American to be a pope.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I'd like to know about that is his last name is Bergoglio.
Doesn't sound.
Last time I checked, that doesn't sound very Latin.
No.
And his parents, Italians.
With a name like Bergoglio, I'm shocked.
So I still haven't figured out how he's the first Latin American. Maybe, living somewhere. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go live in Ireland for a week or so. Then I can be Irish.
Was he actually born in Italy? And then moved there?
I don't know. I'm going to have to do
Maybe you should do some research.
Maybe I'll prepare for the podcast next week.
That won't be any good.
All right, so I've heard that the new pope's name, Francis, as much as I'm making fun of him, it was actually taken after a halfway decent guy.
Yep.
This St. Francis of Assisi. He was from the 13th century, so not many of you remember him. Well, no, you're listening to this podcast. You know who he is.
Probably.
I have heard about this pope that he is following in the footsteps of this previous Francis in that he is willing to ride the bus to work. And I believe his papal quarters that are ginormous, maybe he's only going to use like subsections of them or something.
Is he going to let the poor people in?
When he retires, instead of the helicopter to the Mercedes to the castle just south of Rome,
yes,
maybe he'll ride in a Lamborghini instead. It's something like that. It's a little more cost effective.
He's going to scale down.
They'll rent the Lamborghini instead of buying it outright. Yes, exactly. Another thing about this guy, he's the first Jesuit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, it is. The wonderful Jesuits who are known largely for education and communication with others. Something tells me maybe they're trying to get in a guy who may be able to speak to today's youth, as we would call them.
I heard that. I think it was NPR the other day, and it was talking about it was about CPAC and reaching out to today's youth, and they classified it as under 30. We're no longer today's youth.
Now, the other comparison I heard, and this one might be even more apt. The other comparison to the original Saint Francis, is that he was said to have been summoned by God to repair a church in ruins.
It seems like the Catholic Church always has that.
It's like they go from era of ruin to era of
more
ruin,
yeah.
or worsened condition.
Worser.
We'll say worser ruin. A quote from 2007 at a Latin American bishops conference. Apparently, he got his card previous to that.
He got his card.
Yes. They took his Italian card and just cut out some letters. He was quoted as saying, I should give credit to the National Catholic Reporter, who quoted him as saying, "We live in the most unequal part of the world, which has grown the most, yet reduced misery the least. The unjust distribution of goods persists, creating a situation of social sin that cries out to heaven and limits the possibilities of a fuller life for so many of our brothers."
So this is the aspect of this guy that's most interesting to me.
Yes.
He's conservative, quote unquote, right? But this sounds like socialism to me.
Well, he is conservative in his dogma,
his
supposedly.
polity.
Yes. We'll see what happens.
There's also some questions about whether or not he not so much supported the overlords in Argentina, but
didn't resist them.
Didn't resist them and was a little close to them. And
now this is something that should be talked about. Remember the last pope,
which one?
Popus Emeritus.
Emeritus Popus.
Yes,
the guy that's still alive.
Yeah, the guy that's still alive.
Yeah, I remember him.
They'll have him killed soon. That's what they did the last time.
It's a new Dan Brown novel. There was a good.
That's what they did last time, though.
The last time this happened?
The last time this happened, yeah.
They killed
They
the
put
other
him
guy.
in prison,
Yeah.
and he was in prison
They
for a
exiled
while,
him, right?
and then they
exiled him and basically killed him. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Somebody said Tom Hanks should have gone down to the Vatican and just run through the St. Peter's Square just to screw with people.
You know what the problem was? They solved the crisis and selected this new pope too quick for him to grow out his mullet. Otherwise, Tom would have.
Otherwise, they'd be filming already.
Yes, exactly.
Dan Brown is like, I can't believe that I can't even write this stuff. It's ridiculous. Go ahead.
So, Andy, I was hoping you could comment on this idea of a social sin being linked to unjust distribution of goods. What kind of a social sin is that?
How do you comment on that? A social sin is when someone else has something that I want. Is that? And
they haven't given it to me yet.
And they haven't given it to me yet.
Yeah.
No, to be fair, there are poor parts of the world. Obviously, people live on less than $1 a day, less than $2 a day.
Yeah. I'd like to live there. If you can live on less than $1, wow!
I don't know if I'd want to live there.
That's a horrible.
That was a harsh,
horrible thing to say. We'll cut that out.
That does need to be normalized, though.
Well,
right?
Yes.
Because food does not cost as much as it does here.
Well, that was my point. I could take $10,000 there and live for the rest of my life.
Live for the rest of your life, exactly.
Right.
You're not going to live that long.
No, probably not. Oh, you mean because of the dollar figure?
I do have to take issue with this quote where he says that Latin America is the most unequal part of the world. Apparently, he has not visited anywhere else, like Africa, where you're not allowed to use condoms, or India, or Pakistan, or Afghanistan.
Let's remember where this gathering...
North Korea. I mean, I think I could probably go on, but
let's remember where this gathering was taking place.
It was it was the Latin American bishop.
Okay, so
okay,
when you're in Latin America, what is the worst place?
Latin America.
Okay, now we understand. I've got to actually agree with this second part of the quote that I was trying to get you to give a good comment on.
The social sin?
Yeah, I think there is a social sin that causes the unjust distribution of goods. The social sin is government. That's where this poverty actually comes from. Yes, he's saying something much different.
I thought we were going for the non-obvious answers, but all right, I'm with you. So you're saying that you think that the Argentinian people are poor because of their government? I'm not following.
Well, it could be that, or it could be just that the man is keeping them down. Oh, wait. No, that's the same thing. What would cause this other than that? Just cruel people, right?
Just cruel
people that have to live among their neighbors who are starving.
Well, I hear
women and children are dying in the streets. We let our old people just fall over and die.
Well, and people just steal from each other constantly. So
yes,
no one actually works in Latin America.
You're a racist.
I mean,
that's what he's saying.
Isn't that what this says?
You're right. No one works.
No one works.
No those people that are better off have businesses
and no one
that employ people.
No one that does work is willing to give up everything that they've earned for the people that don't work. It's really no different than Obama. Right?
Very much so.
This is 47%.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and this is why no matter what, all these quote-unquote leaders of these giant organizations, when it comes down to it, they're all the same person.
Yes.
You can clothe them in wonderful robes and
the funny
awesome hats and things like that, but they're all just out there for the power. And if they're not out there for the power, they get it anyway.
Are you allowed?
And then it corrupts them.
Are you allowed to decline being elected pope? Or
I don't think you are.
Are you allowed to decline even going to the conclave? Can you?
I think you can do that.
You can decline, but once you're elected, it's God's will.
The Holy Spirit guided their hands in then casting these ballots.
I did say he was quoted as saying, joking with the other cardinals, saying, "God forgive you for what you've done."
Well, I thought about that post I wrote, and the end of it, I did get to the point, the idea that the guy with the short straw would be the Pope.
He's left holding the bag.
Exactly, but I should have tied that in a little better with the, they're eliminating people by seeing who no one likes.
Yes.
I should have done that differently. They should have, if people really like this guy, we shouldn't elect him.
Right, if he's popular.
Right.
We should find the most...
Why would we do this horrible thing to this guy we all like?
This poor guy, yeah.
Yeah.
But it is voluntary, right? They could quit.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, then we could have two emeriti.
Emeriti. Is that the plural? How do you pluralize the Latin?
I don't really know. But
that's next week's
Latin
learn
lesson. Yeah. Moving on. So, one pope. I guess this could be a good sign for the Catholic Church. We did mention a little bit his desire to at least appear more humble and abstain from... Okay, so we go from the guy that takes the helicopter to the Mercedes to the castle.
I think you're exaggerating. No, I don't.
I'm not.
I don't think you are.
Well, I could be. It might have been like a Ducati rather than a Mercedes. I'm really not sure.
It must be Mercedes. He was German, right? Is German. He's still alive. I keep forgetting.
I would like to contrast the former Nazi youth Pope with the new guy who didn't sufficiently resist the Argentinian
junta.
Yes, I think it's junta down there, right?
Sure. Bergoglio. Jorge.
What would be the difference? Ratzinger didn't even try. He just said, "Oh yeah, I did that." That was his defense. Yeah. At the time,
everybody was doing
it, and now we have a new pope that says, "Well, they were like in charge. What were we supposed to do?
What did you want me to do?
Did you want me to like say no and resist them? They might have put me in prison." So there is a contrast.
That is so cynical. My gosh.
There is a contrast there, of course.
Not much of one.
Well, one was in Germany and one was in Argentina.
First Latin American, got it.
You got it. Exactly. Moving right along. As Andrew, my co-host, is all about the Twitter these days, I decided to include the first tweet from the papal account at Pontifex, which is just cool.
That's awesome.
That should be what I post under, in my opinion. Wonder if I would carry much weight if I was like at Pontifex 2.
I'm going to register it right now. That's awesome.
But I just wanted to share with you that he tweeted, Habemus Papum Franciscum, which, with my rudimentary knowledge of Latin, means the Pope lives in this house. And his name is Francis.
Latin's really a dense language. It
Packed
a lot in
it's
there.
either that or else it's Pope Francis in the house.
Pope Francis is in the house.
Exactly. Andy, you had something from Forbes you wanted to talk about regarding the Pope.
Forbes asked the question, this is related to some of the other quotes from earlier, is the new Pope a capitalist? And I don't know where they get the idea from. I guess because at some point he said some halfway decent things about, or condemned, certain governments from doing certain bad things. So I could just be we needed a headline for the new Pope, and we're Forbes, so we throw the word capitalist in. And you can make anything into a headline, right? If you ask a good question. I'm learning that too.
You've noticed as you may have noticed in the title to every blog post that Andy has had recently.
It's a question.
Yeah, based on the quote that we read earlier, I'm pretty sure he's not a capitalist.
I'm pretty sure he's not too, but that didn't stop Forbes from writing a whole article on it.
Well, and maybe he just hasn't really had to take a big position because maybe he keeps lapsing into this. Well, back under the junta, we didn't have to make choices.
We didn't have to worry about that.
So I really don't understand
what
the
is this capitalism you speak of?
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually good criticism of Forbes and journalism in general.
The question mark.
We're not sure what to do with this. We know that we're supposed to be reporters who ask all these questions.
We can't answer.
So we're going to put them in the title.
You're right. It actually doesn't appear in the article, I don't think.
It's just no answer to the question. And no one asked the Pope, probably. Hey, Pope! Francis!
Frank.
Frankincense. Frankincense, could you...
Frankenstein.
Oh, man. Hamid Karzai...
Blush.
I can't hear his name without thinking of the Spin Doctor song. And here's a wonderful musical anecdote from Aaron. You're welcome for all those titles that annoy all of you. I think of the Spin Doctor song, Hungry Hamids.
I don't know that one.
I know, you'll have to look it up, just like all the titles.
All the other titles. Yep.
You're welcome.
See, if they were titles, I might know them. They're not. They're obscure lyrics. That's the problem.
No, the title of my post.
Oh, okay.
Not the title of the song. Anyway, Karzai gave a little speech, and, here is how a section of it went. Taliban are every day in talks with America, but in Kabul and Coast, I think it's Coast.
Coast? Yeah.
Cost. It might be Cost.
It's probably Cost.
They set off bombs to show strength to America, Mr. Karzai said. The bombs that went off in Kabul and Cost yesterday were not a show of power to America. Pretty sure he just contradicted himself. But were in service to America. It was in the service of foreigners not withdrawing from Afghanistan.
Is this a shock to anybody?
This is the outrage. This is front page of the Wall Street Journal.
And
Top
everybody
of the fold.
Everybody covered this. BBC.
Everyone. Yes. They keep hitting on this. Yeah, BBC, everyone covered it. And the whole idea is everybody's so nervous because he might have just told the truth.
I think I have the book right here, Charlie Wilson's War. Maybe we should send a copy to him. Like, is this news to this guy that we've been meddling in the affairs of the Middle East forever?
Well, and that's the media's problem. They haven't read the book, Charlie Wilson's War. They've only seen the movie.
They saw the movie.
Based on probably not the book.
Dan Brown's novel.
Karzai went on to say, "We have fought too hard over the past 12 years. We have shed too much blood over the past..." Oh, I'm sorry. This isn't Karzai.
What are you reading?
I'm sorry. This is U.S. Marine General Joseph Dunford. Because we're more concerned about the Americans who have fought too hard over the past 12 years and shed too much blood over the past 12 years. That I actually agree with. They shed too much of other people's blood.
Way too much blood
over the last 2 years.
I like Karzai's response. So he had a couple good zingers here. One was We want good relationships and friendship with the U.S., but a friendship as two independent nations between two free nations. The U.S. has lost more than 2,000 soldiers. We share their grief, but Afghanistan has made tens of thousands of sacrifices. And further on, this is the BBC article, he said, when you, America, a little testy there, when you, America, say the Taliban are not the enemy and Al-Qaeda is the enemy, why do you arrest Afghan university students? Why are you searching Afghan houses? Stop the fight. From my perspective, there is no fight inside Afghanistan. I think he should probably read some U.S. news, because this is what the police do here. Arresting university students and searching houses for no reason. So
That's not true. They flew by in their helicopter and saw a large heat source.
Their drone.
Like now, their drone, yes. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know the Wall Street Journal did have this one thing that reassures me about the whole situation. And that's a quote from Mr. Chuck Hagel. I think we talked a little about him last time, or in a blog post, one of the two. But he said, I told the president it was not true that the United States was unilaterally working with the Taliban.
Is that the key word, unilaterally?
Why would you put that word in there?
I'm going to qualify this.
We're not working directly with them on a one-to-one basis. It's more of a we talk to the Al-Qaeda guys. They talk to the Taliban. We don't want to actually have to talk right to the Taliban.
I've seen that movie, Syriana.
It's disturbing. Why would you have that word in there? To us conspiracy nuts, it's just saying...
It's like a big flag.
Yeah. Well, it's,
Not to the people that read the Wall Street Journal.
Also true. Yeah, but he told everyone this. This was from a briefing or some press something.
Listen, no one is going to point that out.
No, you're
unilaterally.
Right. You're absolutely right. Moving right along.
Today is March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, and I thought I'd just give you a little bit of history, as we're planning to do for all of our podcasts here. Most people have a different idea about St. Patrick's Day. They think it involves celebrating Irish culture. Well, I guess they don't think this. This is what they actually do. They celebrate Irish culture. They wear green. They drink green beer. They eat corned beef and cabbage. They drink more green beer. Whiskey, whatever it takes. And that's probably about all they know. If you stumbled down to the local Irish pub today and asked somebody who Patrick was, they'd probably tell you he was a Roman Catholic missionary who was
No, they wouldn't.
No?
No. They'd say, he's that guy.
He's the guy.
From Ireland.
The guy from Ireland. He wore green, right? All right, they might say he was a missionary. You're right, they probably wouldn't.
He's a leprechaun. That might actually be more likely
he's
he's a missionary.
He was the first leprechaun. That he was sent to Ireland by the Pope, that he used the shamrock to explain the Trinity, that he drove the snakes out of Ireland, all the legendary stuff about Patrick. And I'm here to tell you that, in fact, none of that is true. I'm sorry, but I'm going to give you the actual story of Patrick here, which we don't actually have a lot of real detail about. So it's interesting that all these legends popped up, but they didn't actually pop up till about 1,000 years after his death. So,
well, I believe my general knowledge of popery would also translate to this situation. I think when you're going to saint someone, you have to list, I think it's 3 miracles that they committed. Performed. That's the word that I need. That they performed during their life, so in order for them to attain sainthood in the Catholic Church.
So you just got to start making stuff up, basically.
Indeed.
So here's some of the real facts, as opposed to fake facts, about Patrick, and they come from one of his writings. There are only 2 in existence. The one is basically his autobiography called the Confessio, or Testimony. He was born approximately 385 AD in Roman Britain, and he lived in a town called Bonavim Tabernae, which no one knows where it is. The guesses range all the way from northern Scotland down to Wales, along the western coast somewhere. When he was about 16 years old, he was kidnapped by Irish raiders and taken back to Ireland. He was enslaved and worked as a shepherd, and during that time he became a Christian. And he remained in captivity, continuing to pray that he would be saved, that he would be rescued, and could go back home. 6 years after he'd been captured, he was able to escape, and he eventually, after some tribulation, made it back to England, back to his family. And he had a vision that he was supposed to return to Ireland, which he thought he would never want to go back to, and preach the gospel to the Irish. But in his vision, he was told to wait for the approval of the church, and that he was not allowed to go by himself. So he began studying, he became a deacon, and then eventually he became a presbyter. He was preaching in England. And after 25 years of being back home, finally the church leaders had had enough of him and decided to send him to Ireland.
Where's the worst place we could send him?
I can't believe it took him 25 years.
Yeah.
As a side note, this really reminded me, we're reading, or almost done rereading to the kids, Let Me Die in Ireland, which is a historical fictionalized account of Patrick's life. It's a pretty good book, actually. But this reminded me, this 25 years of him pleading with his church elders, reminded me of William Carey, who was an English preacher during the 1700s, who wanted to go to India and wanted the Baptist Missionary Society to send missionaries to India. He wanted to go, and he had the same problem. At one point, when he preached a sermon or asked a question of some of the elders about why would we not send missionaries, one of them told him to basically sit down, shut up, and called him a most miserable enthusiast. So this Patrick was certainly not the last person to go through this trouble with his church elders. He did go back to Ireland. He preached the gospel there for 30 years, and he died there on March 17th. So actually, we're celebrating his death today.
That's what we do with most saints.
So some of the confusion about, and the legends and the myths come probably from the fact that there was another missionary sent to Ireland around the same time, a little before Patrick, and that would have been by Pope Celestine I. And the missionary,
Now that's a pope name.
That's a pope name.
How do you compare Celestine
Frank.
with Frank?
So Celestine sent this guy named Palladius, awesome name too.
Well, it makes me think of guys on horseback with poles. I don't know why.
Palladius was sent to Ireland a little before Patrick, and unfortunately, I guess for him, he was banished by one of the local kings, the King of Leinster, and he returned back to Britain. So,
I have heard bad things about that king.
A lot. That guy was no good. A lot of the legends about Patrick are really conflated with Palladius and so, back and forth. So, a couple of questions or a couple of misconceptions people have were that Patrick was Roman Catholic. Not true. The autonomous Celtic or British Church was not under the authority of Rome. Patrick would not have been sent by the Pope because the Church in England and Ireland, where the whole island nations there, were not under the authority of Rome.
It's almost like a split there now with the Church of England.
Absolutely, which it leads me to the next misconception, which is, if Patrick wasn't Roman Catholic and he went to Ireland and preached there for so long and had many converts, why is 90% of Ireland Roman Catholic today? And the interesting part about this is that, as usual, we can trace this back to government interference and intervention. So the Pope at the time resented, little after Patrick, about 600 years I guess, resented the British churches, as we said, were autonomous and were not under their authority. So he encouraged William the Conqueror to invade England in 1066. William was successful in his invasion. He was crowned King of England. About 100 years later, the Pope Adrian, not a good Pope name.
Well, unless compared to Frank.
Frank, okay. on a relative scale, I guess you're right. So Pope Adrian issued a papal bull, and he granted the entire island of Ireland.
It sounded the same.
To the then Norman king Henry II. So Henry invades Ireland, raping, pillaging, killing the priests, monks. He destroys all the Irish churches and monasteries and builds Roman Catholic churches in their place.
This was the largely the function of the Norman people at
Yes.
the time. I mean,
They were like the mercenaries.
They were Vikings.
Yeah, they were Vikings, mercenaries.
Yeah.
Go destroy these people, yep.
Yeah. And apparently, I didn't realize how enthralled to the Pope they were.
So about 400 years later, during the Reformation, Henry VIII tried to force the Irish back under English rule because he broke away from Rome.
Yes.
And the Irish rebelled because they wanted nothing to do with these English people, and they stood with the Pope and Roman Catholicism.
Makes sense at the time.
At the time, right?
Yeah, it certainly does.
And ever since then, Irish independence and Roman Catholicism have been totally intertwined in the Irish culture and psyche.
Completely understandable.
So
unfortunate,
but
understandable. I think one thing I'd like to mention here: a lot of my belief about church and state comes from Henry VIII's acts. Often when debating things like marriage and the idea of an official state marriage versus a church marriage and all that, a lot of my thinking on that is actually formed directly from this jerk's actions. I think to a large degree the Protestant church married itself to the state at that time. Some guy that we celebrate a lot, Thomas Cranmer, really was in thick with him, and that's how he became the leader of the Anglican Church at the time. But I guess what I'm trying to say is why giving government or any secular authority power to change the religious beliefs of a people group or an individual, for that matter, is the most dangerous thing we can do.
Well, we have it all through Constantine, right?
Yeah.
I'm a Christian now, quote unquote, so you will all be Christians.
Yeah. This actually leads me to a large criticism of some sectors of libertarianism as well. We have a large contingent of atheists, libertarians, and I love them dearly. However, I often hear things said by them like, well, when the libertarians take over, we'll outlaw suddenly all this religious teaching and blah 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 blah. And the worst part of it is, well, I guess the worst part of it is the idea that they're trying to again force a religious change on people. But a large part of the problem with it is they're doing the same thing that the leftist anarchist movement would do.
Yes,
they're destroying to build something up in their own image.
Yep. Well, leftists in general.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So, cautionary note to my atheist libertarian pals: please think before you speak. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Join us next week for some random thoughts,
mad ramblings,
and hopefully a little more preparation.